Jefferson Memorial is a circular colonnade structure surrounded by 26 columns and covering a 19-foot statue of Thomas Jefferson. On December 15, 1938, John Russell Pope began designing plans for the memorial. He modeled this memorial after the Roman Pantheon in Italy and the famous rotunda at the University of Virginia, the same university Jefferson happened to found. Now, you might not know who Pope was, but you might know of some other projects he had designed, such as the Vanderbilt House in Asheville, North Carolina, the Natural History Museum in New York City, or maybe the Natural Gallery of Art here in Washington, D.C. Finally, after months of planning, on November 15, 1939, President Roosevelt laid the cornerstone for the memorial. Now that the structure by architect Pope had started construction, a contest was held for the designer of the sculpture to go inside. Rudolph Evans was the lucky winner of this contest. Due to World War II, there was a restriction on metals, so Evans had to compensate by making a temporary plaster model painted bronze for the opening of the memorial. But later he replaced it with a 19-foot sculpture of Jefferson and even included some elements that reflected his passions. Examples include a column to represent his passion for architecture, corn stalks to represent his history in farming, and his finest work, the Declaration of Independence, clutched in his right hand. Inside the memorial, Jefferson faces the west side of the mall. The panel located on his left side has quotes from his book, A Bill for Establishing Religious Freedom. On the right side of him are more quotes and pieces of his writings. On the left side, across from the corn stalks, located on the back of the statue, is a famous quote from the Declaration of Independence. Across from the column on the back side of the statue are quotes from colleagues and close business friends that Jefferson sent letters to. In its entirety, the monument rests on 2.5 acres of land and stands 129 feet tall. Surrounding the structure are Japanese cherry trees that can be seen in full bloom during the month of April. In 1 year, 800,000 people come to see this memorial. It's a popular destination stop for many people along the cherry tree walkway located next to the tidal basin.
Eight years after the Vietnam War, the Vietnam Veterans Wall was dedicated in memory of those who gave their lives. However, this memorial did not bring peace. In fact, it brought additional controversy and division to the United States. James Scruggs, the president of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, founded the wall. The VVMF raised nearly $9 million in private donations. The entire memorial contains 3 contributions: the wall, the 3 servicemen statue and flagpole, and the Vietnam Women's Memorial. When the wall was completed in November of 1982, the popular opinion was that it was death-centered. As a compromise, the 3 servicemen statue and flagpole was unveiled in the summer of 1984. Its purpose was to highlight the patriotism of those involved in battle. Another opinion emerged that women were not represented properly for their service. So in 1993, the Vietnam Women's Memorial was dedicated. 4 main objectives were required for the wall. The appearance had to spark emotion, the setting had to harmonize with the structure, the neutrality about the war was essential, and the honor roll must be included. Maya Lin, the architect, desired a safe place for the mourners to show reverence, remembrance, and respect. Ms. Lin wanted the harmony of nature and the memorial to complement one another. Instead of placing the names in alphabetical order, the deceased were arranged chronologically. If they were situated otherwise, the architect said they would be lost in a pool of Smiths. Chronological order shows how our veterans changed history. However, the final product did not come without international or national criticism. Numerous people were offended that a Chinese American was the architect of a memorial from an Asian war. Also, critics felt that Ms. Lin's simple idea looked like a big black scar on the earth. Tension was so profound that the architect's name wasn't even mentioned at the dedication of the memorial. The wall is composed of 2 246-foot-long horizontal slabs that gradually emerge from the ground, forming a V. The slabs meet at an angle of 125 degrees. The vertex of the wall is just over 10 feet tall. The walls are fashioned from black granite from India. A computerized typesetting process called Optima was created in Texas just for the memorial. As of Memorial Day 2011, An array of 58,272 names represent those killed in Vietnam. Tension and dispute continued in America after the war because the wall did not properly represent valor but was rather focused on death. As a compromise between the various points of view, the three servicemen statue and a flagpole was erected. These additions contribute heroism, patriotism, and honor to the memorial. Frederick Hart sculpted a three servicemen statue consisting of three 8-foot-tall young men dressed in uniform. They represent the various military branches as well as the diversity of the Americans who fought in the war. Vulnerability and loneliness in their facial expressions show the true sacrifice of a soldier. For the first time in United States history, a memorial acclaiming women was constructed. The Vietnam Women's Memorial was dedicated to over 265,000 valiant women who volunteered. The majority of the women served the country as nurses, with 8 of their names appearing on the wall. Glenna Goodacre, the sculptor of the statue, included 3 nurses serving their fallen brother. One woman is standing up, watchful for danger, while another is tending to the fallen man's needs, and another is in a praying position with his helmet on her knee. They have no pedestal to show that women were always on the ground tending to others' needs. The statue stands 6 feet 8 inches tall and weighs 1 ton. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial is the most popular memorial in Washington, D.C., viewed by about 3.5 million visitors a year. Through all the pain and controversy, this memorial pushed through and became the great attraction it is today. Whether first or last, old or young, these names are precious to us and should always be remembered.
Williamsburg Christian Academy welcomes you to the Korean War Memorial. We are here today to examine a memorial that starts as the result of an internal civil war between North Korea and South Korea. On the side of North Korea is Communist China. On the side of South Korea is the USA. This war is one that is fought and ultimately ends at the 38th parallel. The Korean War actually begins with an act of aggression by North Korea towards South Korea. North Korea invades its democratic South Korean counterpart in an attempt to try to unify the country. The United Nations later gets involved in what ultimately becomes a war, a civil war, that is a stalemate. North and South Korea land on the 38th parallel, which becomes to today the stalemate line that divides North and South Korea. This line plays a key role in the monument and memorial you are about to see. Congress authorized the construction of the Korean War Memorial in 1986. The initial design for this memorial was conceived by the University of Pennsylvania and its team of architects. Later, because of discrepancies around the actual memorial, a new firm came in and took the memorial to its next location. The memorial is laid out in 3 parts. It is a triangle and a circle. The triangle will include a platoon of soldiers marching across what appears to be the land of Korea. On one side you will see a long black granite wall with etchings that simulate some of the feelings and the experiences of the soldiers of the time. There is an open side to the triangle, that third side, and we will see the wall that honors the 22 countries from the United Nations that supported with men and women this emphasis of democracy. The last part of this monument deals with a reflecting pool, and there we'll see information about those who were killed, those who were injured, and those who were prisoners of war. The base of the triangle is the beginning of a platoon on its way toward a battle site. 38 soldiers that you will see marching across this field represent the 38th parallel. You will see, as you look at this Titanus monument, soldiers that are larger than life, and each one weighs approximately 1,000 pounds. The struggle, the humanity, and the emphasis on each face is so that you the person who observes this memorial gets to understand the paramount importance this Civil War ultimately plays on the landscape of the 21st century. On one side of the triangle is a large black granite wall. In it are the faces and the landscape of Korea. 19 soldiers who are in the platoon are reflected in the black wall, giving us again the number 38. At the reflecting pool area, we'd also like to call to your attention the commemorative plaque inscribed as follows: "Our nation honors her sons and daughters who answered the call to defend a country they never knew and a people they never met." Don't forget to return by night to see the haunting faces of these brave soldiers as they walk across the Korean terrain. Look into their eyes, get a sense of what they faced, and know that these men fought for you. And remember, freedom is not free.
The Lincoln Memorial. This memorial is built in memory of the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. It rests on 107 acres of land along the banks of the Potomac River, and it took 7 years to complete. Henry Bacon drew the design of this grand memorial based on a plan similar to the Parthenon in Athens, Greece. The building is 204 feet long, 134 feet wide, 99 feet tall, and each of the 36 columns surrounding the memorial is 44 feet tall. The columns represent the states in the Union at the time of Lincoln's death. Individual state names are listed above the columns, and Hawaii and Alaska are listed on a separate plaque. The building contains a large seated sculpture of Abraham Lincoln. This sculpture was designed by Daniel Chester French and was carved by the Piccirilli brothers. The sculpture is made of 28 Georgia white marble blocks and alone weighs 175 tons and cost $88,400. The entire memorial is composed of marble from Colorado and Tennessee and limestone from Indiana. On the ceiling are two paintings by Jules Guerin, one entitled Reunion and Progress, the other Emancipation of a Race. 87 steps descend into the reflecting pool from the memorial. This number is symbolic of the line 77 years ago in Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, which is engraved on the south wall of the Lincoln Memorial to the right-hand side of Lincoln's statue. On the north wall, on the left-hand side of Lincoln's statue, is engraved his second inaugural address. It took an entire year to carve all the inscriptions, including the one behind the head of the statue saying, "In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever." Abraham Lincoln affected the lives of many people around the country, and this memorial is built to honor his life and the impact he had on America 150 years ago.
Welcome to the Washington Monument. Plans for a national monument dedicated to George Washington started in 1783, when Congress proposed that a statue of George Washington on a horse be constructed in the Capitol building. This project failed due to the lack of funding, but in 1836, John Marshall, James Madison, and others formed the Washington National Monument Society. The society advertised for architectural designs to decide what the monument would look like. The winning architect was Robert Mills, whose design called for a flat-topped obelisk. On the 4th of July in 1848, the cornerstone was laid for the monument. Attending the ceremony was then Representative Abraham Lincoln, as well as President James K. Polk. Later in 1854, the threat of a looming civil war stopped construction on the monument. During the hiatus between construction, the grounds surrounding the monument were used as a pasture for cattle, and the inside of the monument was used as a slaughterhouse. After the conclusion of the Civil War, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was commissioned to finish the monument. Due to the time that had passed, the same color stones that had originally been used were not available, so at the 150-foot level, you can see a change in the color of the monument. This is where construction stopped and then later resumed after the Civil War. The capstone was placed on the monument on February 21st, 1885. On October 9th, 1888, the Washington Monument was opened to the public. The Washington Monument weighs 81,120 tons and stands 555 and 1/8 inch tall. The monument contains 36,491 stones. Total cost to build the monument was $1,187,710. On top of the Washington Monument sits a 3,300-pound capstone that serves as a lightning rod. Inscribed on the first three faces is information about the monument, such as when the cornerstone was laid and information about the designer. Inscribed on the fourth face is the Latin phrase Laus Deo, which means praise be to God. At the time of filming, the Washington Monument is currently under construction due to an earthquake that hit in August 2011 that damaged stones on the monument. The National Park Service hopes that the monument will be open again in 2014. The Washington Monument is the world's tallest stone structure and the tallest structure in Washington, D.C., and by law, no structure can be taller in the city.
Welcome to the World War II Memorial. The World War II Memorial pays eternal tribute to the millions of Americans who sacrificed their lives. The memorial opened to the public on April 29, 2004 and was dedicated by George W. Bush on Memorial Day weekend. The memorial is artfully constructed of granite and bronze and forms the shape of an oval. This memorial encompasses 7.4 acres of land. At the entrance of the memorial, there are marble flagpoles flying the American flag with seals of the military branches on their bases. Walking through the entrance on either side, visitors progress through a series of 24 bronze relief panels depicting experiences from the war. These 17-foot tall pillars creatively celebrate the unprecedented unity of our nation during the Second World War and are inscribed with the names of the 48 states and territories of 1945 and the District of Columbia. Continuing to the west side of the memorial, visitors will find a 9-foot wall of gold stars with the message, "Here we mark the price of freedom." Thoughtfully named the Freedom Wall, each of the 4,048 stars represent 100 American soldiers who died during the war. After thoughtful reflection at the wall of stars, visitors can enter the circle of remembrance and sit peacefully and enjoy the tranquility of the large pool and beautiful fountains. The World War II generation is considered America's greatest generation, and now their memory is preserved within the physical walls of this exquisite memorial. The World War II Memorial is located between the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument and is open 24 hours a day. Over 4.5 million people have visited the memorial each year, paying respect to the World War II veterans.
12 years in office, World War II and the Great Depression demanded a unique and iconic memorial for President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In August of 1955, Congress established a commission to raise funds for a memorial dedicated to FDR. The memorial is centrally located on a 7.5-acre plot of land between the Lincoln and Jefferson Memorial on the tidal basin. While funds were being raised, the search began for the designer of the project. Competitions would be held for 10 years before the search was over. The designer chosen to lead the project was Lawrence Hopkins. Altogether, there were 5 artists selected to depict scenes or people that were a part of President Roosevelt's life. Mr. Hopkins was known for his environmental designs in public and private gardens. Additionally, Mr. Hopkins included several pivotal events in Roosevelt's life to incorporate in this memorial. He honored each of the president's terms and historical events by designing rooms for each one. Room 1 contains an element used throughout the entire memorial: bronze. For the first sculpture in the room, artist Thomas Hardy designed the president's seal, made from high-relief bronze. Another feature in Room 1 is the work by Robert Graham. It's titled The First Inaugural because Roosevelt is shown waving from his car after being sworn into office. Room 2 holds 3 amazing pieces that show the sadness and despair brought on by the Great Depression. The first piece is a work by George Siegel called The Bread Line, which contains 5 men standing in line waiting to receive their bread rations. The faces of the men depict the stress and worry that many Americans were feeling. The second sculpture is called The Rural Couple, which portrays a man standing next to a woman sitting in a chair. Both of them are solemnly looking down. The last piece is called The Fireside Chat. This shows a man listening to a radio broadcasting one of the president's famous speeches. The last bronze piece in Room 2 is entitled Social Programs and is depicted on a series of panels. Here the visitor can learn about the 54 initial programs that were set in place during President Roosevelt's time in office. Standing in front of these panels is a sculpture that stirred up much controversy. As a child, the president battled the disease polio. While he survived this battle, he was left paralyzed to a wheelchair. Many people thought this was important to be recognized because a large part of his life was spent overcoming the challenge. However, some thought that if they showed him in his wheelchair, people would think that he was weaker than he truly was. Eventually, the difficult decision was made to include this sculpture. Room 3 is the largest of all the rooms. On the back side of this room is a massive waterfall. Water crashes onto boulders representing the violence and destruction of World War II. The tragic event took place during FDR's 3rd term in office. Also in this room is a sculpture by Neil Easton, located in the front of the waterfall. This piece brings in a friend of FDR's named Fala, his trusty dog that is standing right by his side. One of the key features of the sculpture is the look on the president's face. Roosevelt is calm and collected, even though the waterfall's power and destruction surrounds him. The last room is dedicated to President Roosevelt's passing. A 30-foot brass relief sculpture is created by Leonard Baskin. It's called Funeral Cortege. It is his bier on a horse-drawn caisson, followed by people in mourning. Another significant piece in this room is a sculpture by Easton, depicting Eleanor Roosevelt standing in front of a calm waterfall. This represents the peace after World War II. Water is a significant piece in this memorial. The waterfalls hold different meanings. One of the waterfalls is used to depict the violence of World War II, and one is used to show the peace after World War II. The memorial itself is on the tidal basin for added beauty. The water was also incorporated because FDR loved being in and near the water. He grew up close to the Hudson River and was in the Navy before he became president. This memorial honors a man who guided this country through many historical tragedies. Even through it all, he remained calm and steady. This memorial encompasses all that took place and the emotions from each event. A great memorial befitting a great president.
Jr. National Memorial in Washington, D.C. honors Dr. King's international contributions and vision for all to enjoy a life of freedom, equality, and justice. Congress passed a joint resolution in 1996 authorizing the construction of the memorial. The MLK Memorial has come about chiefly due to the efforts of the fraternity that Martin Luther King Jr. belonged to. He was a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity while in college at Boston University. In 1996, the United States Congress authorized the Secretary of the Interior Alpha Phi Alpha to establish a memorial on the Department of Interior lands in the District of Columbia, giving the fraternity until November 2003 to raise $100 million and break ground. In 1998, Congress authorized the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity to establish a foundation named the Washington D.C. Martin Luther King Jr. National Memorial Project Foundation. To manage the memorial's fundraising and design, Congress also approved the building of the memorial on the National Mall. One of the most prestigious sites remaining on the National Mall was selected for the memorial. The memorial is situated on a 4-acre site along the tidal basin adjacent to the Franklin D. Roosevelt Memorial. The design of the memorial is the result of a very competitive bid process. Over 900 applicants from over 52 countries tried to win the design honor. The designer of the famous memorial is Lee Yixin. Mr. Yixin has won top prizes in the national competitions 3 consecutive years and was recognized as a master sculptor, which came with a lifetime stipend from the Chinese government. He has sculpted over 150 public monuments, including statues of the Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was a Chinese communist revolutionary and the founding father of the People's Republic of China, which governed as chairman of the Communist Party of China from its establishment in 1949 until his death in 1976. This was a great controversy around the decision by many critics, including the world-renowned poet Maya Angelou. The disputed inscription was a paraphrase from King's drum major speech reading, "I was a drum major for justice, peace, and righteousness." Critics argued that the quotation was taken out of context when it was paraphrased and shortened. Poet Maya Angelou said that it made King sound arrogant. The designer and his team then had to go back and remove the quotation and re-engrave the quotation on the statue to make it look like the quote had never been engraved. The changes cost between $700,000 and $800,000. No taxpayer dollars were used for the repairs. Despite this change, the location and position of this memorial is remarkable. The address for the memorial has special significance. This street address is in reference to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, adding to the location as an important part of the memorial's design. The cherry trees are positioned to bloom in a particular spot so as to cause the effect that Martin Luther King Jr. is gazing upon them. The centerpiece of the memorial is a 30-foot statue of Dr. King. His body is carved into the Stone of Hope, which emerges powerfully from 2 large boulders. The 2 boulders represent the Mountain of Despair. The boulders are split in half to give away the Stone of Hope, which appears to have been thrust forward toward the horizon in a great monolithic struggle. The Stone of Hope and the Mountain of Despair together represent the soul-stirring words from Dr. King's history-making speech. On the visible side of the Stone of Hope, the text from King's famed 1963 speech is cut sharply into the rock. Out of the Mountain of Despair is a Stone of Hope. Every visitor enters to the Mountain of Despair and tours the memorial as if moving through the struggle that Dr. King faced during his life. Visitors end in the open freedom of the plaza. The solitary Stone of Hope stands proudly in the plaza where the civil rights leader gazes over the tidal basin toward the horizon, forever encouraging all citizens to strive for justice and equality. Opened 48 years after Dr. King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, Washington, D.C. welcomes another great leader to the National Mall. It is the first major memorial along the National Mall to be dedicated to an African American and a non-president. A visit to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial is a must-see on any trip to the nation's capital.
"184 lives lost, 184 benches dedicated." The Pentagon Memorial personally pays tribute to every single victim of the 9/11 terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. The nation's first 9/11 memorial was brought into existence 7 years after the incident. Unlike any other D.C. tourist attraction, this 2-acre commemorative site that hosts 1 to 2 million visitors a year wasn't selected by a board of directors, but rather by the 5 terrorists who plummeted American Airlines 77 at 530 miles per hour into the Pentagon. The architectures behind the prefabrication came from an unadorned loft rather than a high-class penthouse office. Spouses Julie Beckham and Keith Caseman experienced their big debut by winning at a design competition of 125 entries. The couple was able to work through the grievances through the creative process, gaining much more than an academic exploit. Inspired by Maya Lin's design of the Vietnam Memorial, Caseman and Beckham strive to achieve a similar atmosphere, promoting a safe personal place to perceive, interpret, and grieve. Unlike any other, the serene, acute location does not provide tour guides or information pamphlets, but advocates an individual journey of perception. We wanted to invite people to think, but not to tell them what to think or feel, claims Caseman. The $32 million construction project, funded by private donors, consists of 184 curved bench-like structures and approximately 85 paper-back maple trees. Engraved in each stainless steel bench is the name of a loved one, and underneath is an individual reflecting pool illuminated with lights beneath the water. The light play, especially at night, intensifies the terrain, glimmering off the steel. Depending on if the victim died in the Pentagon, the bench faces the west side of the building, but if one died in the plane, the bench faces the sky. Some find it unsettling to have such memories provoked, but Beckham asserts part of playing respect is to understand and remember what happened. Julie Beckham and Keith Caseman could look anyone in the eye and undoubtedly say that they put their best work forth in commemorating the tributes lost on 9/11. Extensive controversy was not a major problem during the process of design and construction. However, the dedicated architects interpreted each problem that came about as an obstacle to overcome, not a compromise, ensuring that the Pentagon Memorial would be the best it could be.
The Washington D.C. War Memorial is resembled for the remembrance of the World War I soldiers that fought and gave their lives. The memorial stands on West Potomac Park and slightly off of Independence Avenue. Authorized by Congress on June 7, 1924, funds to construct of the memorial began spring of 1931, then dedicated by President Herbert Hoover on November 11, 1931. The War Memorial was the first memorial to be erected in the West Potomac Park, part of the National Mall near the Lincoln Memorial. Frederick H. Brooke, Horace W. Peasley, and Nathan C. Wyeth are the 3 main architects to construct the D.C. War Memorial. It is the form of a 47-foot tall circular colonnaded structure. Resting on a concrete foundation, it stands on a 4-foot marble base platform, making the memorial 43 feet 5 inches in diameter. Surprisingly, the base is large enough to hold an 80-piece orchestra. Surrounding the memorial are 12 22-foot tall fluted Doric marble columns supporting the dome. Inscribed on the base are the names of the 499 District of Columbia citizens who lost their lives in the Great War. This memorial honors so many lives that were lost with bravery and courage of the World War I soldiers. Without their hard work and dedication, we wouldn't have this memorial to honor and remember them.
Bridges. Over 200 million people cross bridges every day. Roads. Over 350 million people use roads to get from point A to point B. Without these structures, life as we know it would be much more difficult. So I ask, How is the United States performing in keeping the infrastructure of bridges and roads at peak efficiency and safety? Lives are in the balance with each day's crossings, travels, and commutes. According to the ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers, 1 in 9 bridges is considered structurally deficient. The average age of the 607,380 bridges in America is over 40 years old. Now, how many 40-year-old structures are in your home? All totaled, the United States needs to spend over $76 billion to fix all the problems on all bridges. Now, transferring to roads, over 40% of major urban highways in America remain congested. It costs the U.S. economy $101 billion in time and fuel annually. An estimated $107 billion is needed to significantly improve the condition and performance of roads. The fundamental quality of life in cities, suburbs, and rural America depends on safe, efficient, and passable roads.
America, your overall infrastructure rating is at a D+. It is 1 letter grade away from failing. It is costing each person time and money, 2 things business people do not like to waste. What else must we, the American people, do to ensure that you take action? All the other infrastructure sections and subsections are important, yes. But when it comes to the very roads that you and I use every day, the system is archaic, out of order, and passé. I think that not only do roads deserve the attention of our Congress, we must mandate this attention to secure life, liberty, and prosperity. It deserves action. To get a better understanding of the dire importance and attention this problem needs, we contacted a local contractor by the name of CNS Construction. Let's hear what they had to say.
In a perfect world, first of all, it'd make it easier for roads to be built, bridges to be improved and expanded. A road usually involves multiple permits, and the permits are hard to get. There's a lot of legwork that has to happen by engineers, by designers, by the government agencies in order to issue the permits, approve the drawings. And usually that's years and years and years and many dollars in the process. You know, locally, Interstate 64 needed to be widened a long time ago. In my opinion, it's not a safe road. It's impeding commerce. It's inhibiting access to the military bases, which is critical for defense. It ought to be easier to build. It ought to be easier to design them, put them out for bids, and to build them. The regulations are, they've gotten to the point where they're impeding progress, and they're impeding the goal that we all have. We want to build roads, and we want safe roads, and we want them built in a environmentally sound way. And they've definitely gone beyond that, in my opinion.
To get an even better understanding of this situation, we contacted our local JCC county representative. Let's hear what she has to say.
Number one, when I look at, as a public servant, when I'm looking at our funding allocation, it's always the priority should be the health and safety and welfare issues. And transportation safety is one of the top priorities, and maintaining our infrastructure. And once you build it, maintain it. Otherwise, if you let it go and it deteriorates, then it becomes extraordinarily expensive to make the improvement again and to make it safe. And it's important also when we go through General Assembly and the governor, when he puts his budget out, that the money that goes through VDOT goes into the ground, so to speak.
United States Congress, this is a real issue that must be resolved immediately. The longer you wait, the worse the problem will become. let's put the time and energy into fixing, repairing, and renewing our bridges and roads.
As others have pointed out, the American Society of Civil Engineers once again gave our infrastructure a dismal report card. Our nation's bridges were rated C+. The report found that 60% of New York's roads are in poor or mediocre condition. That's why I believe a strong federal investment is necessary. We can't allow our country to continue to fall behind, and we need the long-term policies that ensure sustainable funding for our nation's infrastructure.
So we urge you to put this at the top of your infrastructure priority list so that people know that Congress is doing its job in keeping the United States of America safe, economically viable, and fully accessible.
America's energy infrastructure faces four main problems: a crumbling electrical grid, a profound demand in energy but dwindling supply, and the fact that a potential lackadaisical laborer could hold the fate of a catastrophic power outage, millions of dollars lost, or even more astonishing, the probability of a domestic, unexpected cyber attack that could cripple the United States energy grid.
How would you rate our energy system? What grade would you give it? A+, the most efficient in the world; B+, among the most reputable in the world; C+, average in a world growing more energy dependent; D+, the status of a developing nation; F, completely dysfunctional compared to the rest of the world. Astoundingly, the American Society of Civil Engineers puts the current rating of the United States energy system at a D+. Why this D+, you might ask? The status of a developing nation? How could this happen under the leadership of any Congress?
Some stats on the current U.S. electrical grid and its needs. This current system dates back to the 1880s. $673 billion in investments is needed by 2020, $11 billion in annual increase over current investments, and service interruptions are projected to cost about $197 billion by 2020.
Our country's energy grid is more than 100 years old. The average power line and transformer is older than 25 years, and the average power plant is over 30 years. Plus, the grid was designed to carry smaller loads, while Americans today are increasing their demand for energy. Why risk a hurricane event causing a vulnerable energy grid to fall apart? 680 power outages occurred between 2003 and 2012 due to climate changes such as hurricanes. These outages led to $33 billion lost annually. The United States spends $14 billion on energy annually and consumes 1/5 of the world's energy usage. Despite the grid's many technological marvels, the only way most operators know that the power is out is when you call them on the telephone. In this day and age, that's simply not good enough. But it's hardly surprising given the chronic lack of investment in the grid.
Part of it is not so much what it would cost, because a lot of things are just in the matter of ordinary course of doing routine maintenance. We simply haven't made the reinvestment in the grid in many years.
Weather events aren't the only mishaps that could affect our energy. A careless shovel could rupture an oil or gas pipe. We have faced many attacks from multiple countries by spies trying to penetrate our electricity grid. These spies have left behind software that has the potential of disrupting our system. These attacks cost millions of dollars to correct.
A report in today's Wall Street Journal says sophisticated hackers have planted software programs that could disrupt electric service.
What we're seeing today is prepping the battlefield for 21st century warfare.
Sophisticated hackers, many sponsored by Russia and China, are daily attacking the computer systems of critical government and private facilities, everything from the Pentagon to nuclear power plants.
Sometimes our electrical grid gets overloaded. When this happens, a mandatory blackout occurs. California faced a mandatory blackout in 2000, which lasted no longer than an hour. However, businesses lost millions of dollars during the process. How can Congress accept this developing nation low standard?
The challenge we have in the electricity grid, as anybody who lives in the eastern part of the United States has recognized in the last few months, is that the grid itself is very susceptible to storms, other kinds of power interruptions, catastrophic outages such as cascading electricity blackouts, or even things like cyber terrorism or physical terrorism.
A real crisis in our grid, and this is why, despite being a superpower, we have a grid that is comparable to a third world country, and that's not right.
Energy affects so many other units of infrastructure. For example, if we didn't have power, we would be without water also. We would lose sanitation, good health, cooking, and the care for infants and the elderly will be impacted. The energy infrastructure is one of the most important priorities for an industrial world-class democracy, since so many are dependent upon it to operate successfully.
How will Congress stop the crumbling energy infrastructure in America? How will Congress harness the supply and demand of energy in America? How will Congress stop the wasting of taxpayer dollars on careless energy mistakes? How will Congress protect our infrastructure from devastating cyber attacks? How will Congress raise us from a D+ to an A+? The answer rests with our representatives, and we expect action.